Okay, and then to reassemble that, we're going to take the valve and the spring, put them inside, make sure the pin comes through, put the stop in the back, a little bit of grease on that back O-ring just to make sure that it seals up properly. Put the spring clip in, make sure it seats down nicely into the groove all the way round so it'll stay in the valve. That's good. Check that the valve works and the spring is pushing the poppet nice and squarely. Okay, then we're going to take a look at reinstalling the hose, but we do that after we put it back inside the valve body. So the valve body is going to come through, and we're going to want this hole to line up with the hole on the side of the valve body. We also want to make sure the valve is the right way round. It needs to be this way round, so that when the hammer comes forwards it hits the pin on the back of the valve. This O-ring on the back is important to make sure that it's lubricated, and it's going to cause a nice seal inside. So we put that inside, push it forwards, should be a nice snug fit until the valve lines up. Then we're going to get some PTFE tape. Now whenever you wind PTFE tape on a fitting, try to always wind it in the direction that you're going to screw that fitting into the gun. That means that when you do start screwing it into the gun, the tape stays tight on the fitting and doesn't end up being pushed off of the threads. Okay, so we have that. We'll start it into the threads of the valve by hand. Then I'm going to take my wrench, tighten it round, bring it round back so that it's snug, and you can see where the hose wanted to be from how it was previously installed. Just bring it back so it lines up nicely with the valve system. Okay. Now we're going to reassemble the gun, and the first thing we're going to do is put the valve into place and put the retaining screws into it to line it up. Now the valve fits with a plastic piece through the side of the body. It goes on a pin and it needs to sit in there nice and flush. Let's put the bolt on, make sure that it's in nice flush correctly, and we'll turn it over and we'll put the two valve retaining screws into place. Now don't over tighten them, just put them in, find the thread to make sure that everything locates and stays in place. We will tighten them up in a moment. We have the valve, we have the bolt on the front, we have the barrel adapter which is keyed and fits into a recess in the body so it can't twist. Make sure that that fits in, lines up nicely. We have a blank off plug that just fits into the body like so. We're going to take the hammer, make sure the O-ring on the front is in good condition. We have the charging handle. The charging handle goes through the hole, and there is a cross hole in the charging handle. That will allow the spring and the spring guide to fit down inside the hole, and that will go into the back of the gun. And then we have the bumper O-ring, which is extremely important. Do not forget the bumper O-ring. That goes over the spring, it just drops into the recess. And then we have the back cap, which fits onto the spring and spring guide. Press it into place slightly and drop it into the grooves in the receiver, and it will hold the whole assembly together. We then need to make sure we take our connecting rod, and that will go in the bolt and into a hole in the hammer. Rotate them around so that connecting rod fits nicely into the recess in the body half. Do not forget to put your ball detent into place, and that ball detent is simply going to fit into the recess in the body shell, like so. Okay, so we have all those pieces together. We're then going to take the other receiver half, drop it down over the top, and it should just drop into place quite nicely. There'll be a little bit of gap that just gets tensioned down as we do all of the bolts, and it should fit quite nicely into place. We can put the charging handle cover back on, and then we're going to go through and we're going to put the bolts in to actually lock everything down. Now there are different length bolts. We need to make sure we put the right ones in the right location. The long one fits through this back hole, So I'll drop that one in first. Just snug it down but not too tight yet. And then I'm going to put in the other 3. One at the front, at the bottom, one at the top, and one at the rear. And we'll snug all of those down. Okay. Now they should go through and tighten into nuts in the shell that are actually held tightly in place. Sometimes one of those nuts will come out, but it's quite rare. You just need to make sure they're all located. Now we're just going to check that everything's come together nicely. The hammer moves. When the hammer moves back, the bolt moves back. And if all of that is good, we're going to go through. We'll start off. We'll tighten down the valve screws. And we'll flip it over and we will tighten all the rest of the bolts. Now, again, you notice I'm using the Allen key. I'm finger tightening with just the short handle. That's always enough force to tighten down the Allen keys in any paintball product. And it gives you the right amount of torque on the screw. If you use the long handle, it's very easy to put too much force on one of those screws and strip out the threads. So you can use the long handle to undo the screws, but always tighten with the short handle and the little leverage to get them nice and snug, but not so tight that you do any damage. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the grip frame back on, and that will line up. And we have the through bolts. Now the through bolts on the Combat come with Allen key recesses in both sides of the bolt. So from the left hand side we're going to put the round piece in, and from the back we're going to put the hex head in, and we'll do the front and the rear ones at the same time. And then tighten those down. Careful not to over tighten them. If you over tighten them, it is possible, if you over tighten them, to actually force the hex head to rotate inside the glass reinforced nylon handle. If you do that, it's not the end of the world. You simply put an Allen key in there, have an Allen key on either side of the gun, and it still works just perfectly. Okay, so the gun's fully assembled. We have the safety on. We cock the gun, we make sure that the SIS system is working, safety's working, push the safety off, pull the trigger, everything cycles. So everything's looking good. Now we're going to take the ASA and bolt it back onto the bottom. The 2 screws for the ASA, one is longer than the other. The longer one goes at the back, so that when it actually comes through, they end up being the same length. And then we simply tighten those down. I like to do them just snug but not tight. And then take a look down the gun and make sure that the bottom line is nicely in line, so the gun doesn't feel like it has a kink in it when you put the tank on and raise it up to your shoulder. And then tighten them up as tight as you can. And there we are, we should be good. A little bit of blue Loctite on any of the threads is always a good idea, just to keep everything together. Now we're going to put the accessories back on. This is the feed neck. Put it on, line it up with the feed port. Okay, we'll put the rear sight back on. Tighten down the screw so it clamps onto the standard Picatinny rail. Take the foregrip, slide it onto the lower Picatinny rail. Try not to let your barrel roll off the table. Tighten down the bottom screw, and then simply thread in your barrel. And there you go, your gun is fully assembled. Everything looks good. Thank you very much.